Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are back with another Neurodiversity Stories, and we cannot wait to bring our incredible guest today, who's going to be talking. She's an educator. She's worked on the Neuroline program. She's done some phenomenal work. She'll be talking about her son, and we'll also be talking about some amazing topics around this. So please do, as always, let us know. If you have any questions throughout the show, then please, again, do let us know. And as always, we can't do this without you. We've reached so many different countries now, and we are absolutely thrilled to be literally serving as many people as we can. If you would like to be a guest on this show, please do reach out to us. We are looking for guests literally all the time as we are back. So that's all the admin side of it done. But we do have a phenomenal guest. But what I also want to say is we also can't do this without yourselves, but we can't do this without the incredible sponsors that we have. And I want to tell you a little bit about Neuroline, who are an incredible organization who we're working with. So I'm really excited to share with you. So Neuroline is an innovative program designed to transform how we support struggling readers. Okay, they're built by people with lived experiences and backed by research. It offers a fresh, effective approach to reading intervention that truly makes a difference. Huge thank you to Neuroline for sponsoring this conversation. And let me just show you a little bit about them.
Neuroline leverages years of fieldwork and neuroscience research to unlock your child's reading success in a fun way. The Neuroline is a 40-hour program and includes cognitive therapy, reading exercises, and speed reading. What makes Neuroline computer game-based program unique is that the games train the auditory system, the visual system, and the motor system together, because that's what the brain needs for skilled and automatic reading. During the cognitive therapy part, we address the auditory processing speed in the form of acoustically modified sound to rewire the brain so that students can accurately hear the difference between the sounds within words. We work on visual processing skills and ocular motor skills development with translucent and opaque moving graphics. Neuroline also addresses the eye-hand coordination and motor skills. Our approach is multisensory because fluent reading requires multiple systems to work together with split-second timing. Reading exercises bond what has been corrected from the cognitive therapy program and reinforce timing, spelling, fluency, and comprehension skills. During the program, we give rewards to motivate students to persist on their way to success. We know it works because 99% of students improve reading by at least 2 grade levels in 40 hours.
It helps your mind to put the words and the sounds together, and somehow then it makes sense to you and it becomes easy, it becomes part of you.
Every child has the potential to learn. It is up to us to give children the tools they need in order to move forward in their lives.
So guys, that is Neuroline, and please, all the details for how to get in touch with them will be all in the blurb in the comments section. So please do check them out. Incredible people, incredible software, doing incredible things. So guys, I want to now introduce Bethany, who is going to be our next guest, who is absolutely phenomenal individual. So I want to tell you that Bethany's passion for helping children began at home when her son was diagnosed with dyslexia. After seeing his reading ability transform through the Neuroline program, she stepped into the role of advocate, not just for him, but for countless other students facing the same struggles. But her story goes deeper with this, within the incredible work that she has done. So I'm absolutely honored to introduce Bethany to you. So please do welcome our next guest. Bethany, thank you so much indeed for being a guest on our Neurodiversity show.
Thank you, Darren, so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Bethany, I want to kind of just dive straight in, if that's okay, and just tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself, if that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm coming to you from smack dab in the middle of Midwest continental U.S. in the St. Louis region. And I am a mom of 2 kiddos, a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old. And I'm a teacher as well. Been in the education system for about 18 years, first in the public setting and now in the private setting. and always been in the area of English language literature. But with my son's challenge, I've done a little bit of crossover now, and I find myself doing a lot of work with students who have special needs, particularly in the area of reading.
Wonderful. So have you always had a love for education and helping people? Where
I
did that
was
begin?
Yeah. So I was a natural student. I talk about it in terms of like straight line learning. I enjoyed the school environment. The boundaries were clear. I enjoyed learning. I picked up reading relatively easy when I was young. And so I navigated the system well. In fact, really, believe it or not, I guess maybe more so, I sort of played the game, if you will, of school. I knew what was expected of me. When it came to math and science, that was a different ballgame. That was a foreign language to me. But school is always a place where I felt comfortable. And I did not start out my adult career in education, but I ended up there because I missed it. And I missed the excitement of opening up something new and exciting for students and taking them on that journey. But I've been very humbled and been given new eyes in that I consider my own children to not be what I call straight line learners. They're not sit and get. So I'm my eyes are open to, wow, I need to be watching for students in my class who are not that either. That so much of learning is actually not about the content, but learning how to learn. And sometimes for students, that means developing strategies to overcome some challenges that they were dealt outside of their control.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. And you mentioned about the strategies that you see. And I guess that you've, over time, you've been able to kind of identify, is there a certain pattern that you see forming, or does there's obviously everyone's individual within this side of it, but it's incredible that you're able to help and support, but do you sort of see patterns forming, or do you see, and how you can help and support with that?
So patterns, more and more across the board. There is an increase in the number of students who are having to navigate reading challenges or other challenges, if you will, learning challenges for any number of reasons. Things like ADHD and autism are on the rise. And when you think about the school structure, when you have lots of kids in a classroom and you're trying to move them on consistently and efficiently and to also impart effective learning, more and more you're seeing outliers in that. And the reality is, and I share this with my students right now, I teach the middle grades, 6, 7, and 8. I have taught all the way up to 10th grade. But I explain to my students that a classroom is an artificial learning environment. If you think about the times when you have found your flow and you've completely lost track of time and you find yourself maybe, nerding out completely on something, and it's just delighting, your mind and your soul to follow the rabbit trail, that's learning, right? And so in the classroom, it's not an ideal situation for all types of learning. And as a result, those students who are not straight line, right? They have some neurodivergence. That construct within the classroom is actually more so where the challenge lies. The student, all students with neurodivergence are actually very bright. Rarely is it a case of intelligence. But in the classroom setting where you're asked to sit and conform and move along at a given pace, that's where some of their intelligence is lost.
Yeah,
Yes.
You're absolutely right. I think if we were to take that concept in any other parts of our life, so take our work life, for instance, and I know there's certain industries where you're if you're check out or something, there's a long period of time where you're scanning items and bits and pieces, but generally in a work environment, you would want to get up and walk around, or you'd want to do something. But generally, you're not able to do that because you're structured for pretty much 60 minutes, aren't you, to carry that out, which seems a little bit alien.
Absolutely, absolutely. And depending on what grade you're working with, there can be some freedom for that. But depending on, also the makeup of the students, are they walking around because they need to, or because they see another child is doing it and they just want to jump in? So it's very challenging. And I will say that I am in a classical Christian school, so we're in a private construct. Where our setup is also just different. Our expectations for behavior are much different than what maybe you would encounter in the public school setting. And so we actually don't have a special education resource in the sense of maybe a formal interventionist or pull out classrooms and things like that. We're a smaller school. So that also impacts what we're able to do during the day to help these students. And yet, I have become a staunch advocate that a classical education, if that's what the parents want, we should be able to make that available to all learners. And it's just a matter of figuring out, how do we make adaptations to make that work for the student?
That's really interesting. So how are you navigating that in that sense? I mean, I know you're doing incredible work there,
Mhm.
but how are you navigating knowing what you know and
Mhm.
how the infrastructure is there? How is
Right.
that? Because I can imagine that it's quite a big process to try and install within
It
that
is.
side of it.
It is. It requires lots of conversation with administration, and it requires baby steps because we're very much of the mindset that if a student graduates from our school, we are pre-K through 12th grade, that they must complete the same work that all students have done. We don't want to water down a diploma or a certificate because students maybe were allowed to avoid certain subjects because of their challenges. So we're starting small right now with some students who maybe struggle and need extra sensory input. They have, the busy bands that are on their seat, and so they're able to move, or they have something tactile that they're able to work with. It helps if, in general, for the whole class, we take sensory breaks. Sometimes we'll do that, and we'll start doing some cross-lateral movements just to get everybody energized. If one student needs it, chances are other students would benefit from it. Last year, we had, oh my goodness, we had about 8 students in our small lower school student body of about 120 who were struggling to read. And so I started using my plan time and after school to cycle through these students. I began working with them on some targeted phonemic rebuilding. And it was not part of my paid contract. Families worked with me on the side, and I would pull them out for 20, 30 minutes a time every 2 days and really tried to address what some of their challenges were. And it worked. It's not a long-term solution, but it was a beginning for these students and for these families. Again, families who are looking for an alternative to the public school setting. This was the way that we were able to provide some assistance to them. And it highlighted other things. So for some students, that was sufficient enough intervention. For other students, they needed to take a higher step and step into programs like Neuroline, or step into some things like some occupational therapy, just to help rewire some of their motor systems that are maybe blocking their skills.
Absolutely. Well, it's truly wonderful what you did. And I can imagine it increased their confidence
Mhm.
within their learnings. And I think that, and going back to, the comment you made, which was absolutely right in the sense of, the way that the structure is for individuals, and it can, I guess, lessen the creativity and the confidence in them. If you ask a child to sit in the seat in the same thing for 60 minutes, and then you're asking a child to say sit, or even 45 to 60 minutes, you're asking them to sit in a seat for that period of time, and
Mhm.
then to be engaged with something that they're not interested in or they're
Right.
struggling with.
Right.
There's so many layers, isn't there, to
Right.
to have that. So you must.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you or I, we can stand up and go get a cup of coffee. Even if we're sitting in a conference setting with several other individuals, we're trusted to get up and go do those things. Or we might excuse ourselves and go to the bathroom and come back and sit down and be ready to sit. And so I think a question is, how do we build in some systems like that for our students, and again, some of the larger public schools will maybe even have sensory rooms. A student can step out and go bounce for a little bit if they need to. The question becomes, how do we do that in our smaller school settings where those constructs are just not readily available?
And absolutely. And it's trying to understand why a sensory room is something that we need, and why are the breaks something that we need. And again, like you said, it's not because the child wants an easier route, or not to be able to do something within that side of it, or necessarily wants like I said, dampening down degrees or anything else. But I guess it's trying to work in a way that is inclusive for everyone, isn't it? To be able to do the same thing.
Right. And there's a delicate balance in that it's inclusive for everyone without then creating an added distraction for anyone else. That's I think the delicate balance that we're trying to figure out right now is how do we provide some relief for those students who maybe need to get up, move, get around, but then other students aren't necessarily wondering, well, why did he get to go do that? Or why does she get one of those, toys to fidget with? I want to fidget with that toy. So I think it's multiple layer. One, administration having lots of conversations. Then it's also, I think, even changing the culture among students and having those open conversations that we all learn differently. Some of our classmates, some of our friends are going to need maybe little supports that others aren't going to need, right? And so maybe it's this idea of how do we respond charitably to our comrades in the classroom whose learning may not look like ours, and not demanding that ours looks like theirs.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned, around fidget toys, for instance. And I think if we were looking, say we had 20 students in a class, I don't know if it would be better if we gave all 20 students the fidget toy, and then it would then, again, because I know with a lot of children, they just kind of want to fly under the radar, and they don't want to kind of just be singled out, so to speak. So if you're giving them a device to work with, and the other 29 students or something haven't got one, you're almost you're supporting, but it's almost singling out in a way that person needs that side of it. So I don't know if it's in part of the conversation whether it's everyone gets a fidget toy, and then it would naturally people that don't want it or don't use it won't use it, and then it would just be and I guess that's some of the conversations and the balance you have to find, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because there is the case where, again, depending on which grade, some of those students are going to look at them as it's a toy and it's playtime, not that it's a tool. I think some of the greatest sensory devices are the ones that you can't see, something that can be tucked under the desk or inside the desk or at the student's feet. So if they feel this need to tap or whatever it is, it's not totally noticeable. But I absolutely agree. There's an element where just making it available across the board might eliminate some of that stigma, for sure.
Absolutely. I always remember in school when I was able to sit certain lessons, there was I look back in my school days and I think to myself, dyslexia just wasn't readily available. It just wasn't a terminology that I knew of. I didn't know the word terminology dyslexia until the age of 36. That was when I was diagnosed. So, but I always remember back in some of the lessons I was allowed to kind of sit in that, the tapping of the pen and continuously. And I would always think to myself, that from a sensory point of view, that was really kind of triggering within that side of it. But I completely understand that back then, that was probably enactment of what would be now a fidget toy or something, to a sensory product to be able to help and support that individual.
Absolutely. And finding those things that don't make noise, right? Because I've realized something about myself as I stand in front of the room. I notice that I sway. I have a real light sway, or I notice that if I end up with a paperclip in my pocket, I'm always playing with it or fiddling it. And so I've come to realize about myself that I also have sensory needs and I'm manifesting those. But as an adult, I've found ways of being able to get that sensory input without bringing attention or without causing distraction. And so, I think a little bit of coaching of helping students. How do you get what you're after in those silent and subtle ways? Because I know if I try to lock them up and say, no, you can't, I've shut down their learning. Their brain is needing something in that moment. So trying to work with them to find those appropriate ways for sure.
Absolutely. How important would you say that creativity, keeping that creativity and that spark within, a child learning is imperative? How important would you say that is?
Off the charts, 10,000%. Absolutely. So when we think about our construct in our school is we want to educate the whole child, and being that we are indeed a religious school, that includes like nurturing, the spiritual aspect as well. But each of these students is a human being, and every bit of that needs to be honored. And they were given various traits, and they have great capabilities for what they will do with those in the world to come. Again, the classroom is an artificial construct. For here in the US, their first 12 years are compulsory. After that, however, the sky's the limit. When you think about the small portion of time they spend in the classroom compared to the amount of time they spend in the rest of their world, that creativity, that ingenuity is absolutely imperative. And I can see how students, I have one student in particular, I find myself saying his name quite often in the classroom because he doesn't realize that his sensory needs are loud, and just constantly having to redirect him a little bit. And I could see how at the end of a given day, he just feels like he's been pummeled, like, oh, my teacher won't let me do anything, right? And so I'm very mindful to have to come back around and fill that relationship tank and make sure that I'm noticing the other areas in which he is thriving, be it his creativity, be it his innovation, whatever that might be. That's one of the things I was very conscious of when it came to my son and his dyslexia, in that as I researched the various approaches for how to address it, I did not want to lose the creativity that he has. I don't want to lose the perspective that he brings to the table, because I believe the good Lord gave that to him. He's going to use it for something. And just because it doesn't conform to the classroom right now does not mean that we need to squelch that out of them.
Absolutely. And I think it's a real shame, isn't it, that we see, I mean, I can only talk from the UK, so we call it secondary school, not high school, and I can only see that certain individuals, and I had it myself. You go from primary school, which is the primary to secondary, kind of really excited and everything, and then you go into the secondary school, which would be high school. And it almost feels like you're being suppressed. Every year is another element of being suppressed in your creativity or the way that you have to conform in certain ways within this type of. And there's so much pressure. I mean, you're growing, you're developing yourself, you're understanding, you're learning about yourself in this sense. But I do see the creativity side of it. Don't move, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And I think there's only certain lessons where you are able to be creative, I guess. But a large percentage of time, it does seem to be in some outlets that do seem to take it away.
Yes, it does. And I think that has to do maybe with a deeper core level construct of the educational system, right? It's a delicate, there's so much content to impart. There's so much learning to be acquired. Certain subjects certainly more naturally lead to that. I also wonder as well, when you are a teacher in the classroom, many times those teachers were students who did well in school and maybe didn't have as much of a struggle. And as a result, there may be a lack of awareness of that piece of students that is being squelched. I know for myself in my teacher training, I had one semester course on students with special needs. And that almost feels wholly insufficient. And a lot of that was from a clinical perspective. When you see this, it's this, and this is how you address it and things like that, but not necessarily from that whole child perspective. I think in our education system, we have to wonder about our aims. I think for our public setting, college and career readiness is the mantra. But what about living a satisfying life? What about finding your gifts and your talents and finding ways of sharing those with the world, right? That seems to be secondary, maybe even tertiary, or maybe that's the program that got cut due to funding. So, yeah, I feel like there is no easy solution. I will say that I have been blessed by wonderful teachers in my life. And I've learned that my job is to keep two eyes open. One eye to see who that student is now, and one eye to see who that student might become. Because
Wow.
they're not sitting in my classroom to become a professional student. Some of them go on to do that, but there's so much more to who they are. And I, come before you and confess that in the day to day, when we're just trying to keep one foot in front of the other, and we're trying to manage all the things in a given day, that unfortunately it's easy for that to be forgotten. It requires a constant reminder.
I is sorry, I'm a little bit speechless because I've got goose pimples, because you literally said that that statement when you said about keeping one eye open for the student now and then the development. It's probably one of the most profound things I've heard. It's about development, isn't it? When we're looking at a child's development, the educational side, we're helping them develop, and
Right.
and you're absolutely right. We don't want them to always be a student in that sense. There's
Right.
something else and there's more. So it's how can we help within the educational system to develop the student to what it is that their purpose is and what they are going to be able to do within that side of it. I thought that was
right.
just
Yeah.
that way.
And I am in a very unique setting. I'm in a small niche in the classical Christian community where we can do that. That is regularly a part of our discussions about students and about what we teach. Unfortunately, some days it feels a little more ideological instead of practical and maybe on the grounds, part of what we feel we accomplish in any given day. The aim of why someone is an educator, the aim of why a school exists, the aim of why an education system is even in place, really sets the tone for whether or not that's even a possibility. So I think of, great teachers throughout history. Sometimes there are movies about them, or many times people will have that one teacher who they felt really saw them. And I think the key is, how do we really see our students every day and still have energy to go home and, attend to our own families and nurture ourselves, Yeah.
I think when you say, when I think it's that thing, isn't it? When someone sees something in you that you don't see in yourself in that type, and that is the most beautiful thing I can imagine within any kind of educational role, that you're, and you always seem to. Even though my school days were really, really difficult, I still remember a couple of teachers that were just like angels. They were just incredible individuals that literally, regardless, they didn't judge me. They didn't, it was just, they were just at ease. And I think beauty, isn't it? When you become one of those, if you can become one of those support mechanisms in a way that for a student, you're with them forever.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And that can go on to change the trajectory for a student for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. But when we look at the educational system, and I'm just touching on the fact of, if we took an average day, there's so many lessons that were talking from a UK perspective, that we can do an hour of one lesson, an hour of another lesson, an hour of another lesson. If you were trying to do this from a work perspective, every single day, and working on one project for just an hour, and then another project for another hour, and another project, for me, I know that I would burn out in that sense, because the minute you start really focusing on what it is that you're trying to do to try and get somewhere with it, you're then thrown into something else and something else, something else. Right. And I think from a neurodivergent point of view, I like to sort of focus on something, and sometimes I hyper focus, but I think the lessons, in the sense that we do a snippet in the sense of certain things and certain things. Maybe that's part of some of the challenges that we find.
Certainly. So you're hopping in and out, right, all day long. So I have some flexibility with my schedule. Our secondary school, their classes are 45 minutes each, and they have 7 a day. In my middle grades that I teach, I have 9 different subjects that I prep a week. And so we don't necessarily hit all 9, but we might hit 7 in a day. Some might be a half hour, some might be 15 minutes, for example, when we're doing our math drills and things like that. So imagine, yes, the neurodivergent mind that spends 15 minutes on something, and now we quickly need to transition to do something else. And I try to provide my students with a few minutes between those transitions, use the bathroom, fill a drink, transition their materials, things like that. But even that is just one more transition, right? Yeah. And we have played around with this idea of, well, maybe do we have a very heavy emphasis on literature for one semester and then switch to composition the next semester. And then instead of just hopping every 45 minutes, then you're actually able to dive and spend 90 minutes on something and really follow the trail, really get into it before you have to pop back out. But again, the scheduling and the administration of that process, we've yet to come to a proper solution. And wouldn't it be lovely if, we could all homeschool and we could take a deep dive on whatever we want for as long as we want, but the practicality of that is just not there, right?
Absolutely. And again, one subject one subject they would necessarily be really kind of into, and then another subject probably not. So again, it is that fine balance of saying, well, actually, we're now going to be doing 2.5 hours on this subject, and suddenly it's thrown. So I completely understand, and not, I have so much admiration for educators, and I know it's very, a very tricky balance on so many things. And again, the restrictions that you have within that side of it as well. So I completely understand.
Absolutely. If we were robots, I think the options might be limitless. But then we would also be lacking the heart and the spirit that is needed to make it all work as well.
So Bethany, with regards to your son, he was diagnosed, is that correct, with dyslexia? What age was that?
Yes. So he was diagnosed around 6.5. So my son, Bo, he had been in our school's sort of pre-kindergarten program. So he had learned to name his letters. He had learned to name his numbers. But when it came to his kindergarten and his first grade year, he could not connect the sound to the symbol. So he could tell me it was a letter S. He could tell me it was a number 5, but he could not tell me the S was connected, nor could he, in his mind, really wrap his head around 5. What is 5? He could count 5 dots on a die, but when he sees this numeral on the paper, it meant nothing to him. As a result, even copying from the board was difficult for him because he had no connection to the symbols that were on the board. He'd go to write something on his paper and it was, hieroglyphic nonsense. It didn't translate. And I had originally chalked this up to the fact that he was 6 weeks premature. He had spent some time in the NICU, maybe developmentally, he still was needing some time. But by the beginning of first grade, he's coming home saying, I'm stupid. Nobody thinks I can do anything good. And that crushed me because I know how long he still has to go in the system, so to speak, right? And I was reminded of a 10th grader I had taught years ago, and I was asking him about his work. He said, I'm just not smart. I was like, what do you mean? You repair car engines on the weekend. That's incredibly smart if you ask me. And I come to learn that he was just very young when he entered school. He was a struggling reader, and no one caught it, right? Too many kids in the classroom. And so here he is as a 10th grader still thinking he's just not smart. And the reality is he was just never taught the way he needed. And so I knew I had to do something. So by the end of first grade, we had confirmed by specialists that he did indeed have dyslexia. I had suspected it. So not only typical B and D reversals, things like that, but he would have these peaks where he could retain information, and then he would have these valleys where nothing he's learned is sticking, and we'd ride this wave. So as much as we worked on his spelling from week to week, he could only artificially hang on to it for a short period of time. And so that to me has also become a sign of a student is struggling. They're not retaining this long term. So we had him tested, but in my 10 years in public education, I had about 2,500 students. A sizable portion of that, probably 25%, were struggling readers. Now, we know, according to our national scores, only 30% of our publicly educated population is reading at proficient or advanced levels, right? So this challenge with reading is very widespread. But I would see students taken out into rooms for pull-out interventions. They would have tests read to them to help them with their reading challenges. But not once in those 10 years did I see a struggling reader improve. So when it came to my son's dyslexia, not gonna lie, I panicked. What am I going to do? I've never seen anything effective. I don't want him thinking he's stupid for the rest of his life, because that's not true. And so I knew that if I was going to employ an intervention, I was not going to use the mainstream repertoire that existed. That's not to say that they maybe don't help in some way. But again, when I was working with students who were at the secondary level, they still weren't reading. And the poor affect on their spirit had done its work. They just labeled themselves as no good, which resonates with your story, right? And it just tears me apart to think that that's how they see themselves. So I did not have the money to go seek out someone to do the work for me, to send him to, an intervention center. But I had a tenacious spirit. And so over the course of a couple months, I digested about 1,000 pages of reading to really understand what is dyslexia. I think it's not as complex as people make it out to be, and yet it's a little more nuanced than their B's and D's are tricky, right? And so I wrapped my head around differing perspectives, and I kept coming back to this idea of neuroplasticity, and the idea that with two hemispheres of the brain, the right hemisphere usually is the brain that kicks on first as we're growing and developing. And it's not true that one hemisphere reads, the other does math. Both are required for those tasks in various ways. But what I came across was this idea that the connections were not being made between the hemispheres. His right hemisphere was trying to do all of the reading and processing tasks, but there are parts of the left hemisphere that are absolutely essential to being able to decode, to be able to make the connection between the sounds and the symbol. If he tries to continue to artificially do it with the right hemisphere, it will not work. And this is why dyslexia is not something you can tutor away. If it truly is dyslexia, it's a miswiring in the brain. Connections are not being made. So as I did my research, I came across Neuroline, and it very much spoke to the neuroplasticity of the brain and rewiring those connections. Now, you talked about the creativity piece. I did have a concern. Well, what if I engage in this therapy for my son? It rewires his brain so he can read, but he's not the same boy anymore. What if his creativity and the way he sees the world and his sweet, deep, compassionate heart are different, right? Because we're talking about the brain. And I'm happy to say all of that is still intact. But the cognitive therapy involved to really get those hemispheres speaking worked wonders for my child. He has a classmate who was also diagnosed with dyslexia around the same time. He was diagnosed around 6.5. He's now 8.5. He has a peer who they've taken more of a tutoring route, and he continues to go to tutoring. I believe it is 2 days a week. And they've been told he needs to continue to go so that he doesn't regress. But Bo and I had success working through Neuroline cognitive therapy over the course of 2.5 months. And he's on par reading with his classmates. The program, excuse me, as you saw in the commercial, it focuses on the cognitive therapy aspect. So it does the visual, it does the motor, it does the auditory, and through game-based modules, it's helping the student make the connections between the hemispheres where they're not firing. Now, I don't have all the scientific definitions. Ingrid Puport, who is the founder of that, could certainly explain that better. But it has significantly changed his life and our life. He went from scoring D's and F's on his spelling tests, and then in second grade, he was scoring A's and B's. He went from not being able to read the world around him to where I can't type a message on my phone with little nosy reader wanting to see what it is I'm texting, right? And we were driving around town and he sees the signs and he's reading these multiple syllable words. Now, is there still some catch up to do in terms of him being able to write up to speed with his peers? Yes, because he spent the first 2 years of his primary learning not able to make the connection. But he's a reader. And so as a result, the work that I was doing tutoring students last year, several of them are transitioning over to Neuroline as well, because tutoring is just not enough. What I loved about the program is in 40 hours of cognitive therapy, they guaranteed that he would increase his reading by 2 grade levels or more, or money back. I can make that risk. Whereas other therapies require year after year of targeted tutoring and practice, 40 hours, right? And so we did about 3 hours a week. Over the course of it was 13 to 15 weeks. It focused not just on rebuilding his phonemic awareness, but his fluency and his comprehension. But again, it did so in a way that rewired the connection in his brain. The left hemisphere is functioning. This past August, I had him reevaluated by a educational psychologist, and he has 0 signs of dyslexia. She says it wouldn't have even been part of his report had I not even mentioned it. So, yes. And so though Nearline specifically focuses on the reading brain, he went from not being able to remember math facts because he didn't understand what the numeral 5 meant in the abstract. He's able to do more than his math facts. He's able to handle grade appropriate math concepts, right? You have your multiple digit subtraction, addition, you're carrying, you're borrowing, all of those things that are appropriate right now for 3rd grade reader. More importantly, his heart was restored. He doesn't go around calling himself stupid, right? That mantle has been lifted from him. And one other interesting caveat, Bo, due to being in the NICU and the way he was fed, he had a little lisp with his S's and Z's. That's gone. Right? So now hear me, please, right? This cognitive therapy isn't exactly designed to cast an enormous net and correct all the things that maybe present challenges, right? At the same time, what they're finding is that as they rewire the connections in the brain, several other things are falling into place just by virtue of reestablishing those connections.
That was truly breathtaking, listening to the story of and the journey that you've both been on. You've all been on within that side of it, and I go back to kind of raising that confidence and that person who's now independent in that sense that they feel confident to be able to to do these things, and reading is just so important within
Yes.
any form of confidence, isn't it?
Absolutely. Reading is perhaps, next to giving them life, reading is perhaps one of the greatest gifts that we can give our children, right? I believe you've spoken with Ingrid, who is the founder of the Neuroline program, and she herself could not read as she was getting ready to bear her own children, and she wanted to be able to give them that gift. This is another beautiful thing that I love about Neuroline. This is not created by an educational company looking to get the next dollar. There was blood, sweat, and tears as she trained herself to read, and then as she shared this with those around her and the world. And it is making an incredible difference, one reader at a time. In fact, I shared with the company, how do we get these in schools? Because interventionists are wasting a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money on things that aren't translating to success for a young one, right? How can we course correct and give them this gift of reading, whether they go on to be people who enjoy reading for their own enjoyment or not, to know that you are literate in the world around you and you can participate in the same things that everyone around you is participating in, just to know you can drive down the street and successfully navigate your way. Remove so much fear and so much unnecessary anxiety off of a shoulder. It's one of the greatest gifts we can give to further our civilization.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned about Ingrid and her story as well. And I think, the greatest challenges that she had was the greatest gift that she was able to give others because of those challenges. And then she wanted to make sure that, I remember speaking to her and Erica as well, and telling me that, she did not want anyone her daughter to feel the way she felt and to go through what she went through. And I think, she absorbed a lot of that pain to be able to then create something which was, and what a gift.
Absolutely. If there's a nomination process for Nobel Peace Prize, I want to find it. I want to nominate her for real, because we're
incredible work.
Absolutely. So it's providing hope, and what greater thing can you pass along? And I will say, in this journey, I am humbled. Again, I was a straight line learner. And as a teacher in my early years, I did not have eyes to see. And to all those students and all those families, I apologize. I didn't know. And now I do. And I know very real what it is to watch your child struggle and to be, in a system that is far greater than you, and it has its constructs as it's trying to educate the masses. But now I do, and with whatever resources I am given, I want to try to bring that to whatever students are around me that need it as well.
What does the future hold for yourself and from Bo? Some incredible things that that you're all doing in that sense. What does the future look like?
The future, oh my goodness! Like for Bo, the sky's the limit. Whatever it is, he loves the outdoors. He unfortunately loves video games, but he has such a visual acuity. That's the thing, is a dyslexic brain sees in pictures, and so their capabilities are far more visual and imaginative than, say, mine, which very much thinks in terms of words. And so I think he will go on to do something very creative, probably with his hands, whatever it is he's seeing to shape, almost like a Leonardo da Vinci or something like that, in some way. For myself, I anticipate being in the classroom for as long as I can be, and very specifically coming alongside Neuroline. Sometimes I get to talk to schools and share with them both story. And my pleading with them is, please, whatever intervention you're using, put it to the side right now and try this. Will you just try this, please? And bring hope to families in a much more effective way. So I think education is just a part of where I'm at, where I will be.
Well, Bethany, it's been absolutely a blessing to speak with you and to hear about your story, Bo's story, and the incredible work that you've done, building up to this. And I feel that because of, it's almost like it's like a you've relit the possibilities of how people can learn and the possibilities of things. So it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation having with you today.
Thank you very much. I know that when I stumbled upon this, I just felt like we had received an answer to our prayer, that hope was there, that this was not going to become a lifelong struggle for him. And I love that Neuroline is breaking out into other languages as well. So this is not just going to be an English speaking opportunity for families. So I really think that they are on the forefront of changing the future for countless non-readers.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for the for the stories as well, and telling us about this incredible program, which I've had, numerous conversations, and I completely second what you're saying. So thank you so much for bringing this. I wish you the very best, and Bo the very best, and thank you so much again for being a guest on the stories for us.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. So a massive thank you to Bethany and telling us all about the incredible work that she's doing. Please do check out Neuroline. All the details for this incredible program will be in the comment section, and obviously the links to wherever you have found us on all the different social media platforms as well. We will be back next week with another neurodiversity stories. But thank you as always for all of your participation, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye. Oh, Bethany, can you hear me? Oh, 1 second.